Hello and a warm welcome to all. I am Gunjan, an FPRC intern pursuing Masters in Political Science from Nagpur University. FPRC is privileged to have distinguished Ambassador Lakhanlal Mehrotra today as a guest for the Diplomatically Speaking initiative of video interviews. We believe his views are valuable to understand Indian foreign policy. He has served as a distinguished diplomat, first as a member of Indian Forest Service since 1958 till his retirement in 1992 as Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs and Prime Minister's Special Envoy, and then as UN Secretary General's personal envoy in Cambodia and Indonesia on peace missions. He has been a witness to history making events of our time as part of his diplomatic experience. It covers practically every region of the world, including Tibet, China, US, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Europe, South America, Africa, and even the Arctic and the Antarctica. As president of ARSP from 1996 to 2004, he undertook various initiatives to enlist the cooperation of Indian diaspora for making of new India. His book, A Diplomat's Odyssey, is an account of major turning points in recent times. He also explains how Indian foreign policy has evolved to serve national interests. Now, I'd like to invite Professor Gaur, the Director of Foreign Policy Research Center, to continue the proceedings. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Gunjan.
Thank you, sir.
I think you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
What about Ambassador Mehrotra?
I can hear you. It's quite loud and clear.
Okay. Thank you, sir. First of all, let me express my heartfelt thanks to you. I'm really grateful to you for having accepted our invitation. And we hope to benefit from your valuable views on various aspects of Indian foreign policy. Just a minute, I will take to say something about this project. The project is to teach the people of India, the youth, about the various complex issues of Indian foreign. And that is possible only when policy makers, diplomats, and media persons and academics, they express themselves on certain issues. So with that band in view, I will begin this interview. And once again, my heartfelt thanks to you for sparing time for this interview.
No,
Sir,
I'm very happy.
I have to begin with your favorite, theme, your favorite subject, and you are known for your expertise, your experience about this relationship. That is India-China relationship. I have already explained to you that this relationship started on a very cordial note after 1950, but things went wrong, and we had to face all this in 1962. Then again, these boundary issues came up. The last one was the Galwan Valley clashes and all. So my basic question is how this change in the attitude, the policy of Communist China has come. We started with a Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai. And now what has happened to them? How this problem can be resolved?
You know, much water has flown down the river since 1950. It is not a very good story because it has some very major ups and downs. We are dealing with a neighbor whom it has become very difficult for India to trust. Therefore, any resolution of a problem with a country which you find not trustworthy is very difficult. I'll try to explain why I say that China is not a trustworthy partner. You look at the development of events from 1950 onwards. you mentioned 1950 as the threshold. They, the PRC was founded in 1949, so it could not be earlier than 1950. I had the privilege of visiting China in even as a scholar from Allahabad University uh, in the year 1954 November. Now, now, now that was not much after the Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai spirit. We were overwhelmed by that when we were in China. And we were received, the only delegation that was received by Mao personally on the ramparts of the Forbidden City, where he was taking the salute of the parade on 1st October. We were the only delegation received by. We were received by Mr. Chu En Lai at his residence for tea. Now these were very special gestures. But from then on, I would say there has been a steady development of a policy by China which had been wishy-washy. In 1950, they very clearly, without any ambiguity, told Ambassador Panitkar that they would like to have a very peaceful resolution of the Tibetan issue. They were facing the question of Tibet's autonomy, and the issue was whether Tibet will get back its autonomy under the PRC, which it had enjoyed for a long time, or whether it would be treated as an independent entity, which it had functioned from 1913 onwards under the 13th Dalai Lama. Now, these were difficult issues for China also. It was not easy. But China told us that they will resolve this matter very peacefully. But lo and behold, the same year, by October, their forces had moved into Amdo to go into Tibet. Now then, they went right up to Tibet, but they did not right up to Lhasa, the capital of Tibet. And with with Tibet under their occupation, military occupation, the Dalai Lama appealed to the United Nations. The Dalai Lama's appeal to the United Nations was attended in the Security Council with a very large presence of the Security Council members, including the permanent five. Now, at that meeting, India was asked as to what is the status of Tibet, because the Dalai Lama said that we have been aggressed upon. We want our territory to be safe. United Nations is committed to a policy of non-aggression by neighboring states, and China has aggressed on our territory. So the British were asked as to what was the position of Tibet during your years of rule over India. And India is a successor state to the British. So we wanted to have the same relationship with Tibet as the British had. And we wanted the Chinese to define it very properly. The British delegate very clearly stated that Tibet was under the suzerainty of China. And that settled the issue for the United Nations. Now, from then on, at that time, Prime Minister Nehru made an appeal for a peaceful resolution of the differences, and a delegation via Calcutta was sent by the Dalai Lama to Tibet. That was the agreement of 1951, in which the Chinese guaranteed the full autonomy of Tibet and the Dalai Lama enjoying the same status as the head of the state and as the religious head of Tibet as he had been enjoying in the past. Now, when the Dalai Lama came to India in 1959, he made a statement that the agreement was signed by his delegation in Peking under duress. Now that is a different story. But from 1951 onwards, events unfolded in Tibet, which had been very, very close to India culturally and politically and trade-wise. And it had most of its relations were with India. Uh, the fact was that our relationship was such that passports issued by the Tibetan government were accepted by us. We gave visas on them, and not only us, but UK, USA, and 7 other countries accepted their delegation. In 2000, when we have observed the 2500th anniversary of Lord Buddha's birth in India, Tibet was invited as a separate country. But then we accepted the agreement between the two. The Dalai Lama's people had, it was proclaimed that they had signed the document. We believed it. Dalai Lama himself visited at the invitation of Mao to Tibet, visited Peking as the guest of Mao Zedong. And Mao Zedong again repeated that you will enjoy all the autonomy that you have enjoyed in the past. But what happened in 1955, 1956, 1957, 58, 59? I was posted in 59 in Sikkim. And all the stories from Yatung, from Gartok, from Shegache, from Lhasa gave us a very, very grim picture of what was happening in Tibet. Now that has its impact on India. The public opinion in India turned against China. The brothers were turning hostile to each other. China started suspecting that India was prompting the Dalai Lama to move into a state of independence, which India was not doing. Only Khams, not supported by India at all in any possible sense, were fighting the Chinese. And they had killed some 20,000 Chinese. But we had nothing to do with that development. In 1959, the Chinese reached the borders of India and they crossed the border of India in Longju. We had to send them back, but peacefully with a peaceful negotiation with them. They moved 10 kilometers inside the border in the Barahoti Pass. And again, we had to tell them that Barahoti Pass is mentioned in the Sino-Indian Agreement of 1954 as a border pass. So how can you cross that line? So they went back. But then in 1962, they aggressed upon India. They wanted to show their strength. And in one single move, they removed the small pickets that we had established along the border and on the eastern border along the McMahon line. So now you have a picture where from the Hindi Chini Bhaiwai and the Panchsheel Agreement of 1954, you had moved into a position where the Chinese, unprovoked by India, totally unprovoked by India, aggressed upon India in 1952 to assert their rights. We had to put diplomatic pressure on them. They unilaterally withdrew from a war state. They agreed ultimately when the Colombo powers met them in Peking to withdraw to our suggestion that they should withdraw to the September 10 line of 1962, which they did, I must say. But thereafter, 10 years later, another chapter started. I was sent by Mrs. Gandhi to Tibet, to China, and with the message that we can improve relations with them, but on an equal basis, on an equal footing. And we will not bow to China. We will not, we will not bow to China to seek a better relationship with them. It will be a dignified relationship between two sovereign nations, two equal nations on the basis of equality, Panchashil principles of non-aggression, mutual benefit, and non-interference in the relations with each other. Now, we came back in 1970, between 1973 to 1976, we moved towards a normalization of relations. So this is a story, you see, how our relations with China have gone down. Now the Chinese have, Mr. Xi came to India. As soon as he was elected as president, he decided to come to India on Mr. Nehru's invitation. Mr. Nehru's policy, on Mr. Modi's invitation. And Mr. Modi was inclined towards China exactly as Nehru was inclined towards China. Mr. Modi was seeking a very close relationship with China. But what was happening? She was in India. She was enjoying the hospitality in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad of Prime Minister Modi. And right at that time, the Chinese moved into Ladakh, right when she was here. You can see, so I go back to my very first statement that it has become very difficult for India to trust. They moved into areas well beyond the line of actual control, which they have accepted as the line of peace and tranquility under an agreement with us. And they moved well beyond it. They came into Denpasar, they came into Hot Spring, they came into Pangong Tso, they came into the Galwan Valley. They had come into the Galwan Valley in 1962, but they had withdrawn from there because we said this is not fair and we will not accept them in Galwan Valley.
Sir, do you want to say that personal diplomacy has failed in this case?
the
No.
no, it is a, I
Just I wanted to ask you whether the personal diplomacy has failed in the case of India-China relations?
Professor Gore, I would not say that. Diplomacy is a long drawn battle. When relations go as hostile as they are between China and India today, when there is consistent effort by the Chinese to move 2 steps forward and withdraw 1 step backward, the old Maoist dictum, when they follow a policy of slicing, of taking territory slice by slice, and they cross the line and they have an agreement with you to de-escalate. But they de-escalate position in the rest of the area. How do you diplomatically resolve this in a day? But the efforts are on. Our foreign minister, Mr. Jaishankar, who has a lot of diplomatic training, of years of diplomatic experience, including that as foreign secretary. He is now our foreign minister. He has been in, he met the Chinese foreign minister in Russia. There have been interaction with the Chinese otherwise through the SCO and other institutions. There are international bodies where India and China meet, and their interests do not clash. They have been following a united policy on climate change, for example. Now on solar paneling, they are a member of the International Solar Board. Now, now, so we have a capital link with them, but this link, Professor Gore, will take time to mature. You have to come to a point where our diplomacy can succeed. And diplomacy succeeding is always step by step, step by step. It does not move in leaps and bounds. This is what I would suggest.
Yes, sir, you are right to a great extent. Uh, Now, what India should do?
That is a very, very difficult question. You cannot go to war with China. China's striking capability, by fair estimates, is 7 times yours. You cannot go to war with China. And even though I must say that we are far, far better prepared on the border today. And I thank our military forces for the way they have met the Chinese aggression on the Ladakh front. I mean, they have lost many lives. But a full war with China is not a possibility. The only solution possible is a diplomatic solution, and to put pressure on China to de-escalate, to put diplomatic pressure on China, to put maximum pressure by through American channels, through Russian channels, through SCO channels. I mean, they all believe India. They trust India. They know that India has been aggressed upon. They all know that they have crossed the line of actual control. That the facts are very clear in the case. And therefore, they are also, the international community is quite in a position to impress the Chinese that to have regional peace, it is important that China and India are friends. And for India and China to be friends, the Ladakh issue has to be resolved through de-escalation. So they should move away from hot springs.
Sir, now I will come to another subject that is very close to your heart. You have been associated with that, and that is Tibet. And I think no one is better equipped than you to say about Tibet, how this problem has evolved and all that. But I would like to ask you about India's Tibet policy. We have been getting confused signals about India's Tibet policy. Sometimes we are for them, sometimes we say, or we will not allow you to do anything in India. And first they are invited for swearing ceremony of Prime Minister. Then in 2019, there was no invitation. And even the officials were asked not to be a part of the celebrations that Tibetans have in Delhi. And then again in 2021, we see our Prime Minister wishing Dalai Lama on his birthday. So don't you think these are very confusing things? What exactly India wants to do in relation to Tibet?
The question is related to our relations with China very intimately. In 2014, when Mr. Modi took over, one of his primary objectives was to have a very close relationship with China. And he thought that for that policy to be implemented, perhaps, I do not know what went internally into the parlance of the government. I have no idea. But I think he thought that keeping the Tibet and the Tibetan question away at this point of time when we were seeking a close relationship with China would be better than expressing a very intimate relationship with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans in India. And because the Chinese have been very sensitive about it. So in 2014, the Dalai Lama was not invited. I think that was wrong on our part. It has been a constant of our policy on Tibet that Dalai Lama in India would receive all the respect from India as a religious leader. We don't treat him as a political leader here. He is a religious leader, and he is a religious leader not in India only. On the global plane, he is a religious leader. In Tibet, he is regarded as an incarnation of Avalokiteshvar. He is an incarnation, therefore, he is compassion incarnate. And his message to the world is of love and universal friendship. How can we not be close to this man who is so, who Tibetans derived all their culture, all their Buddhistic institutional links are with India. So how can India not have a very close relationship when the Dalai Lama is on our own territory? Therefore, to extend respect and regard to him as a religious leader and as a leader on the world plane, as a Nobel laureate of the world, we don't go wrong when we invite him to important gatherings.
Sir, I would like to
but
know
in
your
but now
views
now
on
now that listen, but now it is being corrected. The Prime Minister, for the first time in several years, sent a message of goodwill and for the health and well-being of His Holiness the Dalai Lama on his 86th anniversary, in July. And that is a very good move. And I say that that is quite in line with our traditions. And if the Chinese feel hurt, it is their business. But we are respecting the Dalai Lama as a religious persona. That is what I mean.
Sir, now I come to another subject which is very dear to you. You were in Moscow on 2 occasions and you served there India's interest very well. Now, even regarding to India's relations with Russia, some people have started, questioning that Russia is no longer a reliable or a dependable partner. How can we correct this misconception about Russia? Because Russia is having a close relations with Pakistan and other countries, which India doesn't like. So, how would you say that Russia is still a very dependable, reliable, uh, partner, a friend, an old friend of India? So, how we can correct this misconception?
First, I would like to tell you that in international relations, we must always remember, Professor Gore, that there are no permanent friends and there are no permanent enemies. There are only permanent interests. That is very important. How close was China to the Soviet Union? The Chinese Communist Party was born with Soviet efforts. Just a few years after Lenin moved into Leningrad and declared the Soviet Union as a state of the world. That relationship got totally changed by 1972 when Nixon visited China. So a little up and a little down should not matter very much. But Putin and us, we have been very close to each other. Putin has determinedly followed a policy of friendship with India. And there should be no misunderstanding about it. That's what I would say.
Sir, I think Russia is misunderstood. Russia has always been a friend of India. Even in 1962, their silence was a little friendly to us. And they tried to persuade China not to aggravate the conflict and all that. And even now, after Galwan, I think there was a meeting between the foreign ministers of three countries where Russia tried to
Russia,
persuade China and also assured India that the things should not be allowed to go out of hand and let the two countries live as neighbors, good neighbors, friendly neighbors. So I think the role of Russia is misunderstood. I mean, the relations with Pakistan maybe in their national interest, but I think they cannot be at the cost of India. I mean,
no,
they will always be having India as their friend and reliable partner.
exactly.
This is our opinion.
There is
Sir,
no.
one thing more. Your last posting was in Sri Lanka, I think.
My last posting abroad was in Sri Lanka. Then I
Sri Lanka.
came to.
Yeah. We have read a lot in your book about the challenges that you faced in Sri Lanka. But I will come to the present times. Why relations with India and Sri Lanka are not as cordial, as friendly, as helpful as they were in the past? Do you blame anyone for this?
I can't. I can't blame anyone in India for it. You know, if anybody is to be blamed, it is Mr. Rajapaksa, in whose time Hambantota was given to China, in whose time the Colombo city port city was given to them for development, in whose time millions of Chinese yuans were injected into the economy of Sri Lanka. And things reached a point when the next regime in Sri Lanka found it very hard to pay the loans and to regularly pay the installments due. This is part of China's economic aggression. This is part of China's imperialist ambitions. Now it is for Sri Lanka to understand this. It is a threat to our security, but we will have to manage our security accordingly. We will have to strengthen our southern military front. There are many consequences of that policy that China and Sri Lanka have followed together. For China, it is a part of the policy of creating a siege all around India through Myanmar, through Bangladesh, through Sri Lanka, through Maldives, through Pakistan, through Nepal. They are trying to do it in Bhutan. They came into Doklam, but we very steadfastly faced them there on behalf of the government of Bhutan and at the request of the government of Bhutan under our defense agreements with Bhutan. So we have to define the parameters of our foreign and defense policy according to the Chinese moves around us. Now you know Mr. Oli, who had gone so close to China, has been replaced in Nepal by Mr. Deuba. And the Congress party there is much more friendly towards India. That's a very major development. It's a favorable development. Politically, I'm being very frank. I don't think things have to be all the time very cagey about stating the fact. I want to state the truth. We welcome the replacement by a Congress party leader there. Now in Bangladesh, we have a very dear friend, Sheikh Hasina. She takes care of India's interests. Chinese try to make moves. They tried to move into Chittagong. They wanted to develop a base, Chinese base in Chittagong. We objected to it. Sheikh Hasina listened to it. But we cannot prevent Chinese from coming into these states at all. China is their neighbor as much as it is our neighbor. And they are a smaller country with smaller resources than India. So in order to, they have to have a peaceful relationship with China. I mean, these are things that we have to understand. Sri Lanka is not in the same position as Nepal and Bangladesh and Myanmar. Sri Lanka does have a border with China. Away from the foundations that we had laid for all those 5 decades earlier, including my own negotiations with President Premadasa and very delicate ones, to give him a very clear message. And Mr. Jayawardene got a very clear message from Rajiv Gandhi. And Jayawardene then came to Delhi, and the 1987 agreement was signed with them. So they moved away from their links that they wanted to establish USA at that time. Then China came in, and Rajapaksa moved towards China. Now we have to find a way. We have to find a way out of this, just as we found a way out of it in Maldives. The Chinese have moved in under Yemen. He was very well disposed, but now the regime has changed there. So we hope we don't interfere in the internal affairs of our neighbors, but we hope that their internal affairs will move in the direction constantly of friendship with India and not with countries that are hostile to India. They will take care of that. It is our earnest hope. That's all we can do. But we can prepare ourselves against any contingency that any policy followed by them will pose for us. That is very important. So we have to be better prepared. And our diplomacy has to move in different directions in order to move any possible threat coming to us for our territorial integrity or our sovereignty from that direction because of their partnerships with other countries. But we can't block those partnerships altogether. We have to behave in a fashion that they will move closer and closer to us. And our very ancient ties. We have the most ancient ties with these neighbors. No other country is so close to them. These are all Indian Ocean entities, and we have been close to them for ages. And we have to keep our friendship with them in that. Thank you.
Sir, thank you very much. I think because of time-bound schedule, we will have to bring this conversation, very interesting conversation with you to a close. We will definitely like to have another meeting with you later to discuss many issues that have not been covered this time. And I hope you will oblige us by sparing time, and I shall get in touch with you.